the Q&A in the chat. We only have 10 minutes for Q&A and it's at the end. So I'm hoping, if we can do our best to stick to our time allotments, we will have time for that Q&A. But encourage you to respond in the chat or in the Q&A dialogue to keep that live. I'll also be keeping time on my side. And I'll turn my camera off while you're presenting, but I will turn my camera back on possibly when we get close to the 10 minutes or when we start to go over, hopefully to give you a little visual cue that it's time to wrap it up.
We will just start in a minute. So Saida can do the opening remarks in about a minute, and we are trying to get Marik in. So in case, yeah, I think she will join now.
So we have 44 participants so far.
So we have everyone now. Saida, we can start.
Great. Greetings, Marika.
Okay, shall we start?
Do you want Marika? I just don't hear her yet. Yeah, there, she just dropped off again.
Okay.
Just one, I know she is our second speaker after me. If she's not able to join, David, I'll just immediately pivot to you, and we'll bring Marika in when she's able to connect. Okay. Great,
Saida,
thanks
over
everyone.
to you.
Okay. Okay, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all of you joining us from around the world. I'm Saida Gawari, Senior Technical Advisor with UNEP's Disasters and Conflict Branch. Welcome everyone to today's webinar on financing NbS, Who is Willing to Pay, which is organized as part of the 3-part DRI Dialogue series on implementing nature-based solutions for resilient infrastructure. I'm sure that there is no need for an in-depth review of the litany of environmental challenges that we are facing, nor to spend much time detailing the resultant social, cultural, and economic consequences thereof. We are all acutely aware of the emerging environmental crisis and disasters facing our planet today. Therefore, close cooperation, investment, and action in tackling the emerging environmental issues is key for achieving a resilient and sustainable development. We have gathered here precisely because we recognize that through strong cooperative efforts by all stakeholders, there is a light at the end of the tunnel, a greater realization of the importance of nature and increased awareness across all facets of society of the irreplaceability of ecosystem services and nature-based solutions should be adopted as an important mechanism to mainstream environmental concerns into social and economic development processes. I would like to welcome our expert speakers who will be highlighting some of the key development and emerging issues around business and finance for nature-based solutions today. But before I invite our first speaker, I would like to request all the participants to take a few minutes and respond to a few poll questions that will be displayed on your screens. I request the platform administrator to launch the first poll question to everyone, please. It's not displaying on our screens yet.
It's visible, Saida.
Okay, the first question is, which organization do you represent?
So, Saida, in case you're not able to see, we have the results of the poll here on screen, and about 28% of the participants are from the NGO sector, 26% from academia, 17% from government, 17% from the private sector, and about 3% from the think tanks. We can proceed.
All right. Next question, please. I think we have 4 of those.
I think the next poll questions might be asked after the presentation, Seda.
No, we actually have 4 at the beginning and then 1 after each presentation.
Great.
So we'll put it up there. I think you also want to do a pre-assessment, Saida?
It's just a few poll questions at the beginning, the 4 questions that yes.
So the second one is up there.
Yeah. Yeah, so the second question, I hope you can display it on your screens. Which of the following are examples of key performance indicators where green-gray infrastructure can outperform gray conventional infrastructure? Reduction of operating and maintenance cost, access to green space, increasing local property value, improved biodiversity, improved public health and well-being through access to green spaces, improved air quality, all of the above. Okay. 73% have said all of the above. Looks good. Question number 3, please. Which of the following is NbS financial solution? Incorporating 50% gray and 50% green infrastructure because NbS can be costly, or monetizing the benefits of NbS. That's good. 81% believe that monetizing the benefits of NbS is a NbS financial solution. Okay. We are now launching the 4th and last question, which is NbS poses an opportunity for private sector investment in pursuit of sources of revenue to reap the benefits of increased resilience, to reduce costs, to enhance reputation and purpose, all of the above. The result looks good. 73% believe that all of the above. Okay, many thanks for taking the time and responding to the poll survey. Without further ado, let me introduce our first speaker and the moderator for today's webinar, Miss Emily Corwin. Okay, Emily Corwin is the Director of Nature-Based Engineering Solutions at Conservation International, a registered professional civil engineer in the state of California, and the founder of an environmental engineering firm that focuses on water resource and conservation projects. At Conservation International, Emily works to create the science, solutions, partnerships, and field examples needed to bring an innovative green-gray infrastructure approach to the world's most vulnerable communities. These projects combine the conservation and restoration of critical ecosystems with the selective use of conventional engineering approaches to provide people with solutions that deliver climate change resilience and adaptation benefits. Emily studied hydrology at the University of California, Davis, environmental engineering at the University of California, Berkeley, and currently leads a global green-gray community of practice with representatives from over 140 organizations and 400 individual members. She is also a member of the Natural Infrastructure Initiative and the American Society of Civil Engineers Committee on Natural and Nature-Based Infrastructure Systems. Wish you all a successful and meaningful dialogue today. Over to you, Emily.
Great, thanks, Seda, and welcome everyone. And thanks to CDRI and all the organizers for this event. We have a great turnout and a great representation of different speakers to talk about this important question about who will pay for nature-based solutions, such an important topic. So I also want to thank you for your interest in this topic and the work you are likely doing every day to implement more nature-based solutions to address our global challenges. And like Seda said, that's not the theme of this conversation, is to go into the challenges, but as you all see in the news more and more every day, we're reading about the impacts of sea level rise, flooding, drought, and biodiversity loss, for example. And pragmatically, there are a range of potential solutions that we can use to address these challenges. In our most built environments, a gray-only solutions like seawalls may be most appropriate. And on the other end of the spectrum, a purely green solution like mangrove restoration or conservation may be best. So one type of nature-based solution our community of practice is working to advance is green-gray or hybrid infrastructure. And this really draws upon the best of our engineering achievements to create solutions along this spectrum. So green-gray infrastructure can deliver the service as infrastructure in its own right. It can enhance the functioning or resilience of other infrastructure. It can protect engineered infrastructure assets from climate impacts such as flooding or high winds. It can boost the functioning and health of infrastructure sector workers. And finally, it can deliver a range of social, environmental, and economic co-benefits. And these translate to key performance indicators that we can use to evaluate and compare and track how infrastructure projects are meeting their objectives. So compared to gray-only infrastructure, we can expect nature-based solutions like green-gray to, for example, reduce operation and maintenance costs over the project life, increase local property value, improve biodiversity, improve public health, improve air quality, and reduce or avoid loss during extreme weather. So I want to share with you funding and financing playbook that we developed with our community of practice specifically for green-gray infrastructure. And why did we think there was a need for this playbook? And this cartoon depicts my lived experience and possibly yours I just shared with you all the potential benefits of green-gray projects. But from the investor perspective, there's a key element that might be missing. And that is a guaranteed return on investment. So first, the playbook is a tool for project developers to better understand funding and financing terminology and the potential capital stacks that are needed to implement green-gray infrastructure projects and possibly realize a return on investment. And second, for funders, financiers, and investors to better understand the potential for green-gray infrastructure investment opportunity. So the playbook has 7 chapters. The first describes why now is the time to increase investments into green-gray infrastructure. One reason is that infrastructure asset exposure to climate change and nature loss will accelerate over the coming 2 decades. Post-COVID infrastructure spending is a truly unprecedented opportunity for infrastructure investment. There's a more robust set of global frameworks for ESG, or environmental, social, and governance standards, and sustainability that are emerging, and these will facilitate the integration of climate and nature-related factors into investment decisions. Next, nature-based infrastructure investment is set to grow as net zero and nature-positive commitments from countries, finance, and business companies are implemented. And finally, countries' nationally determined contributions, or NDCs, are likely to shift public and private investment towards more sustainable, climate-resilient infrastructure. So the second chapter defines the players and the field of play. And first, there are project developers. So these are public and private sector entities. They could be NGOs or applied research. And then we have our project funders and financiers. So public entities, again, can be also both project developers and project funders and financiers. And then these catalytic capital providers is what we call them: multilateral development banks, development finance institutions, and multilateral trust funds. This is also a place for philanthropy and possibly insurance. And then we have investors, both commercial and institutional. So the third chapter identifies different plays, depending if your project is in a high or a low risk enabling environment, and if the project is being developed by a public or a private entity. The fourth chapter provides a snapshot of the current state of play. So identifying key barriers to funding and financing, such as lack of awareness, making the economic case for investment, and access to finance. The fifth chapter shares 2 case studies from Conservation International, projects that really exemplify some of the funding and financing barriers, specifically in Colombia and Guyana. And then chapters 6 and 7, we propose 4 strategies to accelerate growth that link to player-specific calls to action. So I want to quickly share 4 strategies with you that we recommend, kind of put forth, propose within the playbook. The first is about enabling environment. And one of the things that I learned with the diverse team that prepared this report is where a project is located is possibly the most important factor determining if a project will attract funding and financing. So for example, the political risk, the maturity of the financial markets, or regulatory oversight for public-private partnerships all inform whether a project investment is considered high or low risk. And one thing the public sector can do to improve the enabling environment for green-gray is to incentivize the integration of nature-based solutions within the infrastructure procurement process and require the identification of nature-based and green-gray project alternatives in regional plans and development blueprints. Next, we can catalyze investment by creating country-specific facilities to provide funding for the early stage development of projects at the concept and early design phase, to get the technical support needed to demonstrate cost effectiveness, technical feasibility, and to then attract a diversity of revenue streams. Third, we can promote investor engagement by improving data sharing, specifically about project finance and reporting on key performance indicators. And finally, we need to attract new players and sources of finance to the field. So for example, we can link corporations who've made ambitious climate and ESG commitments to a fund to invest in green-gray infrastructure projects. So I welcome you to visit our Green-Gray Community of Practice webpage, download the playbook, and let us know what you think about what we can do together to win the game. And now, as I mentioned, we have an amazing set of speakers who are going to share their tools, their experiences, and expertise, bringing finance to nature-based solutions. So while I introduce our first speaker, I think we'll see the second question from the poll survey appear on your screen. And many of you got it right the first time around. I guess that's a hint, but this is some information that I just shared with you about key performance indicators specifically. So hopefully you see that. And our next speaker, I invite Marika Naiwal to go ahead and share her screen. And Marika is a global leader for nature-based solutions at Mott MacDonald.
Yeah, sorry, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello.
Hi.
And can you also see the screen? Can you see the presentation? You cannot. Okay, let me just try again.
You can keep trying and I'll keep going with your introduction.
Yeah, that's fine.
So Marika, you've worked on integrated catchment management, climate resilience, and water infrastructure development projects in the United Kingdom, Europe, Asia, and Africa. And you hold an MBA from INSEE and a master's in civil engineering from Delft University of Technology in the Netherlands. So let's see if we can see your screens now. They look great. So I'll pass it to you.
Wonderful. Yeah, is it all right? So you can see the slide, right? Not anything, like not the video that's in the way.
Nope, it looks good.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, well, thank you very much, Emily and CDRI for organizing this. Really an exciting topic, and yes, it's something that we're probably all really working hard on. So this is a we've developed in Mott MacDonald. I'll talk a bit about what the work we have done in Mott MacDonald to help encourage investment in nature-based solutions. And we've developed a decision framework that I'll get to soon. We've also developed an interactive nature-based solutions map that you can find on our website. I'll put a link later in the chat. And in this map, you can explore the different opportunities for nature-based solutions by clicking on the various approaches. And for example, if you click on wetlands, you will see sort of an overview of what it is, and then you can also look at the benefits that they can deliver. So this is in terms of water, the water environment to improve flood resilience, and at the same time water quality and ecological function, and then also for climate change and adaptation and resilience. So for example, wetlands can reduce soil erosion and improve soil health. Then on the mitigation side, they can sequester carbon, provide opportunities for education and community engagement, the restore habitats and enhance biodiversity. And finally, it can also improve amenity value, improve mental well-being through access to green space. So you can also find then examples of case studies. So this, for example, is the Leeds flood alleviation scheme in the UK. So Leeds is in a catchment where river levels can rise rapidly in response to rainfall, and there's a risk of fluvial flooding. And to protect the city and it's almost like 800,000 residents, the City Council and the Environment Agency are combining traditional methods and natural flood management to improve the defenses and build resilience. And this project will introduce natural flood management across the 700 square kilometers of the river air catchments. It's the largest natural flood management project in the UK. And these measures will reduce flood risk in the city and deliver wider benefits such as carbon sequestration, biodiversity improvement, and societal gains. And we've developed a suite of innovative geographic information system tools to identify the best locations for the measures, as well as a woodland carbon tool to estimate carbon sequestration from the creation of woodland. So we've developed a systematic, repeatable and auditable process for managing the development, delivery, and also the monitoring of NFM solutions. And that will be used at hundreds of sites across the catchments. And yeah, we all know about all the benefits that nature-based solutions have, but there's still quite a few challenges on how can we really implement and fund nature-based solutions at scale. So it's still quite immature, I guess, in terms of there's limited data about performance and measurable benefits and long-term costs, and that is creating hesitancy amongst investors compared to tested and trialed options. So related to that, there's also a lack of design and monitoring standards to drive consistency. And solutions need to be at landscape scale. You need land, so you're competing, for example, with food production or industry, and those might give better financial returns. And the benefits often go to various stakeholders. So it's important to engage with all stakeholders and form partnerships and get a funding mechanism in place so that beneficiaries contribute. And that may seem complex because currently we're mostly use siloed approaches. And there's a general agreement that, there's private finance as well needed to reach a scale of nature-based solutions that's needed. But nature-based solutions tend to be small and piecemeal, whilst financial institutions are looking for large-scale projects with a clear risk and return. So there's a mismatch also over the time frame in which private finance expect return, and when benefits come from ecosystem services. And then finally, there's many regulatory barriers, but they vary quite a bit between countries. So to help address some of these challenges, we follow a 6-step decision framework to help to apply a systematic and integrated approach through all stages of the project cycle. And it aims to consider nature from the start of the investment planning as soon as possible, plan for and maximize co-benefits and get more confidence around performance, cost, maintenance, etc. So the first step is to establish a vision. And here we look at, apart from the main desired outcome of the project, so for example, flood mitigation, look at multiple outcomes that can be achieved by nature-based solutions. And these can be regulatory requirements or organizational KPIs like net zero, biodiversity, net gain, nutrient neutrality, social outcomes. And we need to move away from sort of one organization looking to solve one problem to considering multiple outcomes and benefits for multiple parties. And in this way, NbS can be more cost beneficial as organizations can split the costs. A systems thinking is required here, as well as stakeholder engagement to get the buy-in from partnerships. And here are some examples of tools that can help with this process of systems mapping. I won't have time to go into that now, but so then the next step is identify options for NbS. So here we look at options for nature-based solutions on their own, but definitely also to compare, look at combinations in which nature-based solutions complement traditional infrastructure, and of course compare them to traditional infrastructure on their own. Then step 3 is when we will appraise these options using tools to quantify a range of benefits and agree on a preferred option. So we've developed a natural capital map, and that is to sort of value benefits and also monetize benefits that will really help to secure funding. So with this map, we show how changes to land use, so nature-based solutions, can influence the value of natural capital and ecosystem services or benefits, for example, air pollution, flood regulation, and carbon sequestration. And these monetized values can then feed into a project business case. But a common value framework and a multi-criteria decision analysis are then needed to assess and compare these options. And benefits of nature-based solutions, as mentioned earlier, they would often be accrued to various stakeholder groups. So a blended finance approach is suitable. And a systems map can be used again as it sort of underpins a blended finance strategy. So we've developed tools to support the benefits and cost sharing discussions. And there are many other examples out there. For example, these are not McDonald's examples, but this is a lens approach by developed by 3 Keel and others, or the Nature Conservancy that have been setting up water funds all across the world to help, for example, to help downstream water users like cities, businesses, and utilities pay for upstream land management to improve water quality and quantity. So then we move to step 5, which is the implementation of nature-based solutions, where you need a lot of adaptive management as we're working with nature. And then key is to collect evidence about performance of nature-based solutions over time, and also monitor the benefits, their cost and maintenance, and learn for future projects. And that's also always important for any project, but with here we're trying to really build the evidence base. So doing that in a systematic way and so bringing that learning together is really key. So what does that mean for overcoming barriers to funding and financing nature-based solutions at scale? Yeah, we talked about the size of the investments that's needed for financial investors. That's much larger than often nature-based solutions projects are. So aggregating those at a scale that could be fundable by blended finance is difficult, but by having projects where there's also traditional infrastructure that will help, we can create more confidence of investors by standardization. It may be useful to identify different layers of benefits to investors, so revenue streams, and then different markets, and then insurance. But there needs to be a sort of common way to translate this change in a landscape into benefits and co-benefits for a variety of stakeholders. And blended finance is something that still public or philanthropic investment will be always important, but it can really help to de-risk investment and solving some regulatory issues. Okay, I think I've reached the time since I've seen Emily, but thank you very much for the opportunity.
Yeah, thank you so much, and welcome folks to add questions into the Q&A, which you should see at the bottom of your Zoom bar through the webinar, and all the speakers will work to monitor the chat and respond to questions there. We will, after all the presentations, have hopefully 10 minutes set aside for live question and answer. So with that, I welcome David to share his slides while I introduce him. David Ushoki works as a sustainable finance lead in International Institute for Sustainable Development's Economic Law and Policy Program. He has several years of experience in informing and advising public and private investors, government officials, and financial market participants on how the allocation of capital can be better aligned with sustainability objectives. He co-developed the Sustainable Asset Valuation, or SAVI methodology, which maybe some of you have heard of, which uses system dynamics and project financing modeling to assess the environmental, social, and economic impact of infrastructure projects, including nature-based infrastructure. Before joining IISD, he spent several years working with Morgan Stanley and wealth management. As a client advisor, he was responsible for running the daily operations of a busy wealth management desk, providing advisory, trading, and custody services to family offices, asset managers, and high net worth individuals. He holds a bachelor's degree in business administration and a master's degree in international finance. And he's based in Geneva, Switzerland. So welcome,
Perfect.
David.
Thank you very much for this detailed introduction and also for having me here today. So I assume you can see my slides. So I will actually share with you some of our thinking at IISD on the financing of nature-based solutions, or NbS, covering a couple of promising innovative instruments and solutions that we have come across as part of our work in this space. So at IISD, we've been trying to tackle the challenge of financing NbS for several years now. And within this space, we actually focus quite a lot on what we call nature-based infrastructure, which basically refers to ecosystem services and landscape features that provide the service that is often provided by built infrastructure. So our main objectives was to understand better how to address the barriers of financing NbS, how to make this new asset class bankable. So we have done a couple of publications on this, as you can also see on this slide, discussing our findings in more detail. But during my presentation today, I will be sharing just a couple of key points from this report. If you're interested to learn more, I encourage you to go through the one on the left on this slide after the webinar. The one on the right is actually a book that we did together with the Bocconi University. So unfortunately, that one you cannot just download. And we are also doing actually a third report now that will come out sometime in the next couple of months, summarizing our findings from a series of interviews with investors who are already investing in nature-based solutions. So to understand better the size of the challenge, I think it is important to first discuss the current financing gap for NbS. Based on the estimates of UN Environment, $133 billion of financing is going into nature-based solutions every year. A large portion of this amount, about like $115 billion, comes from public sources, mainly in the form of spending on the protection of biodiversity and landscapes, as well as projects in sustainable forestry, agriculture, and fishing. On the other hand, private sources of financing are significantly smaller, only about 18 billion, so $18 billion annually. They include investments mostly in sustainable supply chains and environmental offsets. At the same time, the financing needs of NbS are about $536 billion annually. This means that the financing from both public and private sources need to be scaled up 4 times the amount invested today. So these estimates imply a financing gap of about $403 billion annually. I don't want to spend too much time with discussing the challenges of financing NbS, as I think most of us are probably aware of what those are, but still I want to mention just a few of them. So when it comes to the financing of NbS, the main problem is that it is difficult to assess the benefits of nature. On the other hand, the opportunity cost of nature protection, meaning the foregone revenues from unrealized economic activities that are destructive to natural capital, is much easier to quantify, such as, for example, the revenue generating potential of replacing a rainforest with a palm oil plantation. Also, there's a lack of understanding of the financial and economic impact of biodiversity loss and erosion of natural capital. In addition, the solutions and approaches to biodiversity challenges often need to be highly localized, frequently requiring small-scale projects, which in turn are more difficult to finance. Okay, all right, so now let's talk about solutions. Many of the financial instruments covered in our reports mentioned earlier, and also explained here, provide innovative solutions to monetize the benefits of NbS in order to make them financially viable investments. Basically, they allow treating the delivery of ecosystem services as revenue streams. Some NbS projects provide clear benefits through private parties that can be easily measured and valued. For example, green roofs increase energy efficiency and therefore save costs for heating and air conditioning. This high potential to capture private value can be the basis for specific financing schemes. Other NbS projects mainly provide benefits to the general public and therefore have low private value capture potential. Projects like public green spaces, for example, therefore require different types of financial instruments. We categorize financial solutions in 5 different groups, as you can see on this slide. These are fiscal interventions, regulatory instruments, new government-enabled markets, traditional market-based instruments, and hybrid mechanisms. So these categories demonstrate the diversity of solutions that are needed to tackle the challenge of financing NbS. Unfortunately, I will not have time to give you an example for each type, but you can find a comprehensive inventory of solutions in the publications I mentioned earlier. So the first solution I would like to talk about is the so-called tax increment financing, or TIF. It is used to finance NbS projects based on the anticipated future tax revenue resulting from the new development. This solution is based on the assumption that green spaces and healthy ecosystems, such as public parks, for example, will lead to higher tax revenues for the city as a result of higher property values and increased economic activity and tourism. So this is how tax increment financing works. First, the municipality designates a part of the city as a TIF district. Then the base amount of property tax revenues is recorded for this area based on the status quo before any improvements are made. Then the municipality raises the upfront capital needed for the NbS project through tax increment bonds or loans, basically promising to pay them back from the tax revenue increase as a result of the NbS project. So I think it's important to note that while TIF provides a way to increase public budgets without the need to raise taxes, it can be difficult to forecast the expected tax revenue increase. Also, such schemes require dedicated legislation and could be challenging to implement in lower income countries. The second instrument I would like to talk about today are the betterment levies. So stakeholders that benefit from nature-based solutions, either in the form of higher revenues or higher property valuations, as mentioned earlier, pay a levy that is directed towards maintaining the natural asset that generates these revenues. Betterment levies can be used to fund non-revenue generating nature-based assets, such as green urban areas, for example. However, I think consideration needs to be given to whether there are any negative financial consequences for landowners who may not have the capacity to pay a levy or who are asset rich but income poor. And at last, or at least for the last instrument I would like to cover today, are the so-called stormwater credits. So stormwater markets can incentivize companies and households to invest in NbS to improve stormwater management. So this is how they work. Stormwater markets are based on the level of stormwater runoff that the sewer system can accommodate. This level is divided into allowances between properties. Then properties with low runoff levels, for example, due to permeable surfaces, can trade their additional allowances on the stormwater market. So properties who cause higher runoff than desired, for example, because large surface areas are sealed, need to purchase allowances. So this mechanism creates a monetary value for stormwater management, which incentivizes property developers to explore nature-based solutions. However, I think it's important to note that this requires strict regulation of stormwater management. And finally, I would like to share a couple of final thoughts to conclude. So first, to make NbS projects bankable, it is important that we build a more robust track record for this asset class. This can support investor confidence in the performance of NbS. Robust data about NbS can also facilitate integrated project analysis and reduce transaction costs and uncertainty related to project development. This is what we are trying to address with our NBI Global Resource Center, which you are welcome to visit. To overcome the reliance on gray infrastructure, investors, policymakers, and planners need to become aware of the opportunities of NbS, or more specifically, nature-based infrastructure, and have access to the information they need for the decision-making. Finally, I'd like to see more innovative financing instruments developed to deal with the inherent challenges of NbS that can enable a more efficient allocation of risks and benefits. Thank you very much.
Thank you, David. That was a great presentation. And I think we have one poll question, again, kind of a repeat from the beginning, but just to see if now that the specific answer has been mentioned by one of our speakers, maybe we'll get more folks clicking on the right answer. So please take a moment to answer that. And it's my pleasure to introduce the next speaker. We have Dr. Adarsh Varma. Dr. Adarsh Varma is a director at WSP UK, and he has 17 years of consultancy and advisory experience for public and private sector clients. Adarsh specializes in economic development, business case analysis, and economic appraisals for infrastructure and development projects. He is particularly interested in solutions that demonstrate positive financial and economic returns. He has developed business models and strategic cases that capture wider economic, social, environmental, and governance benefits to judge the viability of projects. More recently, Adarsh has worked on clean growth strategies, valuing nature-based activities, and ESG projects. Adarsh has advised a wide range of clients, including private developers, ScotGov, the Crown Estate, the World Bank, African Development Bank, DFID, GIZ, the European Commission, Asian Development Bank, and national governments and international agencies, including C40 and the Global Green Growth Institute. It's an honor to have you with us, and we can see your screen and welcome you to continue on. And it looks like I just quickly caught the poll results there that most of you got the correct answer, which was monetizing the benefits of NbS is one path towards a financial solution. So with that, Dr. Adarsh, to you.
Thanks, Emily, and thanks to the UN for hosting this event. And so the impact of being third or fourth speaker is sometimes you repeat, and which is actually not a bad sign. Actually, it just shows how important some of the messages are. So yeah, I'm going to speak a little bit more about how to leverage private sector investment in nature-based solutions. We've already heard some really helpful stuff from Mariake and David on this point. So Emily, I also have a cartoon. I think your cartoon was a bit funnier, but I also have a cartoon. While we are discussing COVID in the last 2 years, biodiversity and climate change is a major challenge, which us economists are clearly realizing the benefits working with both government and private sector. So I think you must have seen this cartoon, but kind of it highlights the kind of importance of biodiversity and how it can affect our general well-being, health, and financial security in the future. Some of these messages have been made before, but I thought it'll be really helpful to kind of talk to you about how the process of understanding natural assets and this services leads to a market. And any market requires, buyers and sellers, and this is nothing different here. So even though there are challenges, and David mentioned quite a few, we are seeing some really good case studies all over the world, really good public initiatives, private sector initiatives all over the world, where markets are developing and transactions are happening and the benefits are actually making an impact on the ground. So if you look at the assets, you have all these different nature assets, rivers, green spaces, tree cover, wildlife habitats. We all know some of the services they provide. Some are very difficult to measure, as it has been said earlier, but the evidence is improving, the methodologies are improving, and we can see it in the type of revenue and income streams for these different types of ecosystem services and benefits. So for example, if you have a nice woodland park, you have fees to enter it. In the UK, you're seeing the biodiversity net gain policy for biodiversity conservation. We have carbon offsets around for a long time. Nature-based flood management payments have also been increasing. David had some examples in his presentation, and you can actually see who are the buyers and public and private buyers for some of these services. And I have a case study to describe this in more detail, but there are case studies for all these different types of buyers, and both public and private for these services all across the world. So that was the matrix, but how does that matrix of different benefits and value fit in our current market system? So this graphic might help in understanding that. So for example, you have the direct nature-based products like timber and agricultural products and renewable energy, and that has a very recognized market, especially by private investors. And we're also seeing an emerging and actually now quite well-established tradable market value for biodiversity units, carbon sequestration, and for carbon saving. So the buckets on the left have a stronger recognition in the private sector market compared to the buckets on the right of this screen. So benefits like flood protection, water security, and air quality improvements are not readily recognized by the private sector, but very well recognized by water companies and local authorities and environmental agencies and even health institutions, health entities, because that is actually creating a benefit which fits in with their mandate. And then all of these benefits on the left can be monetized, and some of the benefits like species abundance and volunteering opportunities and social benefits can't be monetized very easily, but still is very strategic for policy and economic decisions. So based on the last two slides, we can say that some type of projects based on the predictability of the revenue streams and the kind of short-term to long-term investability are more likely to be taken up by the private sector. The biggest barrier for the private sector is a regular income and revenue stream that can justify return on investment. And some of these in the top left-hand corner are providing this based on the policy mechanisms and the market mechanisms to support that. So woodland management, habitat bank for biodiversity net gain, at least in the UK and Canada and Scandinavia, we are seeing more and more of these nature-based projects being taken up by the private sector. And just to dive deep in a case study, which I found really interesting, is by the Rivers Trust in the UK, in the Wyre catchment, and this is a natural flood management initiative, and partnership with utility companies, insurance companies, and the transaction has been managed by Traders Bank. And as Marieke was saying, that you need the system thinking, the kind of buy-in for these partnerships is a very good example here. And this project helped in deliver flood management benefits, habitat creation, and improving the water quality, and had social and carbon offsetting benefits. And if you think back to my previous slides, all these benefits fit in different parts of the kind of market. Some buyers would be private for these benefits, and some would be public. And the whole point is to how to bring this together. So this was set up as an SPV, a not-for-profit SPV, and the transaction was managed by Traders Bank. The Rivers Trust showed all the ecosystem services and benefits which Traders Bank could use to raise capital and grants in the market. And the beneficiaries, such as water companies and woodland and the woodland agencies, local authorities, were also willing to pay for some of those benefits. And the sellers were local farmers and landowners who actually undertook all the interventions. And again, Marieke was talking about the reliability of these interventions to achieve the outcomes. So I think some of her tool might really fit in here. And based on this SPV structure, the risks were shared by the different stakeholders organized, and there was a regular stream of payments which Traders Bank were able to manage. And some of the outcomes were really encouraging, especially the fact that they managed to get a private loan and also contributions from high net worth individuals in terms of a grant and impact investment as well for these benefits. And these payments were all analyzed, so they're regular for both the buyers and sellers. And as I said, that the project helped in sharing the entire financial load to get most of the benefits in terms of flood management, biodiversity preservation, as well as the social and carbon offset benefits. It's my last slide. Again, I want to echo some of the messages made earlier. I think it's the importance of research, collaboration, and innovation is really key here, and mainly because of this chicken and egg situation, where good policy requires evidence and quantification to communicate the benefits. But at the same time, once you have a policy, you also still need evidence to show how that has had an impact. Just like a chicken and egg solution, and the integration of different stakeholders, different disciplines, especially which is ethically justified and acceptable both from an economic, legal, and political perspective is really important. So working in tandem is improving a lot in some countries, especially in the OECD, but still challenging in the developing countries. And just I know we've all kind of just come out of the Montreal COP, and you still hear about harmful environmental subsidies, and I'm not going to talk a lot about it because it's been around for a long time and not much has been done about it. But I'm very excited about this new announcement on nature disclosure for businesses, same as carbon. And I saw a lot of global companies have already signed up for this. And I think this can be a game changer in this market. So hopefully that'll create more private sector momentum in nature-based solutions. So I'll stop there, Emily, and thanks for listening.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much, and appreciate kind of hearing the increased confidence that we're starting to have with the number of case studies that are showing the benefits of nature-based solutions. So appreciate you bringing that up. And it's now my pleasure to introduce our next speaker. So Eva Meyerhofer, and Eva, I welcome you to share your screen while I continue with your introduction. Eva is the head of the Environment Policy Unit in the Sustainability and Quality Management Department and lead biodiversity specialist of the European Investment Bank. She leads the EIB's efforts to support the EU and international biodiversity policies, develop business models and financing instruments to support nature-positive investments and drive natural capital transformation, and build an understanding within the EIB of sustainable finance, biodiversity, and ecosystem risks and impacts, including valuation and accounting. Prior to joining the EIB, she was an environment specialist at the Asian Development Bank. She has over 20 years of experience in environmental impact assessment, natural resource management, and biodiversity conservation, and has worked extensively across Europe, Asia, the Pacific, and Africa with various development agencies and projects. What an amazing wealth of experience. Looking forward to your presentation, Aoife. And we can see your thoughts.
Good, great, and thank you, and thank you for the introduction. As has been said before, I think a lot of the key challenges and the issues in relation to nature-based solutions and their financing have been mentioned. So I'm going to be very quick with especially my first slide, but I want to focus on one particular aspect. And coming from a multilateral development bank, and it is the same issue that national promotional banks would face, is the fact that our financing sources do not always align with a nature-based solution needs. And what I mean by that is partly one issue that was raised is that NbS projects do not provide reliable revenue streams. And what it is it's making it important to find other ways to fund long-term operational costs. And multilateral banks, development banks, we finance the whole, let's say, implementation of the nature-based solutions, for example, or of the infrastructure, but we do not finance operational costs. Maintenance and operational costs are not part of the eligible costs for institutions like ourselves. And so this is a real challenge then in the long term, given the fact that the operational and maintenance costs of these NbS are then not supported because of that irregular revenue or non-reliable revenue stream. So this is one very important aspect, and which is not really taken into account in some of these discussions around nature-based solutions, and where we are needing to find other revenue sources. So looking at the second slide, yes, private sector does need to contribute financially, but there are a number of challenges that were already mentioned. And one of the biggest challenges, how do you bring these nature-based solution projects together with investment funds seeking these kinds of opportunities? And I think it was Emily who mentioned certainly the new regulations, the upcoming regulations, the sustainable finance disclosure regulations that you're seeing in different countries, in emerging markets such as Singapore, the EU, but you also have those in North America, and those are providing also great opportunities for scaling up of green finance. You also have, through the implementation of what we had, it was a natural capital financing facility, we saw some of the greatest opportunities for green infrastructure and the integration of nature-based solutions in the water and sanitation, I forgot the end there, sanitation sector and the urban sector. So some of the financing strategies that we've been looking at and that we found were most suitable for nature-based solutions financing, and given the small scale to date of these projects and trying to aggregate them or taking a landscape approach, was, for example, the debt finance, looking at green bonds. They are fast emerging, fast growing sector in the bond market. They allow, it's a familiar vehicle to allocate capital towards sustainability commitments, and is an effective tool for accessing capital for grey-green infrastructure. We have and complying, making sure that these green bonds comply with international taxonomy of eligible activities. So you have standards being developed around, so you've got the green bond principles, but you've got also within the European context, the EU green bond standards, and a number of other robust or more robust green bond standards coming up. One example was what the Dutch government issued a 5.9 billion sovereign green bond, which offered a cost-effective way to finance grey-green infrastructure, including nature reserves and upgraded dikes to protect against flooding. So that's one good example. You've got then, I think it was Marieke who mentioned the blended finance, which is a traditional instrument that multilateral development banks also use, and you can catalyze market rate investments in nature-based solutions and finance more higher riskier projects by taking, for us, let's say someone takes the first loss piece. However, at this early stage of adoption, a nature-based solution needs the backing of multiple stakeholders to recruit the necessary financial support. And so it's bringing in that public finance as well as, or the philanthropic finance together with private sector finance. And there you see, I think most of the nature-based solutions that you've seen supported is through a blended finance approach. There's one that I think mirrors a little bit what David mentioned with his example of the TIF or the fiscal intervention, are what we term policy frameworks. And the policy frameworks we've seen mostly in the urban context. So it's city-led or land-based financing instruments, such as the building rights transfers or developer fees, that do generate revenue to finance green infrastructure. And this strategy has been quite successful with the growing demand for development, transparency, and inclusive governance structures, and strong urban planning. And what we've seen is with the implementation of adaptation and resilience plans in a number of European cities, this being a policy framework that is being more and more used. So we've seen it with the city of Barcelona, you see it with the city of Bonn. You've got some good examples, and I wouldn't be surprised if the city of Leeds has used that type of policy framework. Which was an example, I think it was Marieke who presented the city of Leeds. Then you've got financial risk mitigation, and this is a really up and coming, and I think a very innovative, and what we would term also as parametric insurance, which the insurance companies such as Swiss Re or even Allianz are looking at. The one example, so where the insurance industry provides knowledge to gauge the potential benefits of NbS. And I think it was in the Mexican state of Quintana Roo, the Trust for Coastal Zone Management, Social Development and Security purchased an insurance policy designed to make payouts after high windstorms events to restore damaged coral reefs. So that parametric insurance scheme is being tested and is becoming really a way to finance nature-based solutions. And then funding diversification, and that comes back to my operational issue of operational costs, is that current NbS projects can increase financial security by diversifying funding streams to weather some of the economic downturns, because we know that grant or donor funding that currently underpin NbS projects is not sufficient, is also not consistent for the duration or the size of NbS projects. And so it leaves a lot of NbS projects in peril of failing to secure the sufficient funding to meet the operational costs. So by setting up, for example, endowment funds they can ensure that financial security. But there are, of course, limitations. You need to ensure that you establish an organization needs to set aside the funds, and donors need to be willing to commit to the funds. Then what I'd like to just show is one of, I think, a very successful project in Germany that took a very landscape approach. And it basically looked at certainly supporting a whole area in terms of its flood management and heat management in an industrial area, revitalizing the Emscher River. And you see a multi-stakeholders coming together to finance this. So you've got the private sector, you've got the public sector, you've got a multilateral development bank coming in. So we've provided funding for the wastewater treatment plant, and then the other stakeholders have funded the whole Emscher River renaturalization part. The challenge, though, if you see at the timeline, it started in 1992, it's coming to completion in 2022. So the sewer canal is are going to be now underground, and it's ending there. The cost, we are in the amount of 5.5 billion, right? But what it has done, it has created really about 14,000 jobs. It has gone from industrial mining area to a high-tech area, so it has improved living quality. And what is very interesting is they made a conscious decision to have a flexible approach and to include nature-based solutions, because they found that actually it was a lot more cost-effective than having dikes and dams. But of course, it requires that system approach that I think Marijke had mentioned. I will stop here, given that my time is up, and pass on over back to Emily.
Thank you so much, Eva. I particularly appreciate your emphasis on the need to finance long-term operation and maintenance, and that painful time that it takes to implement and realize projects, and that time is not on our side given the multitude of crises that we're confronted with. So we have our last speaker up, last but not least, speaker up. It's my pleasure to introduce Natalie Olson. Natalie, you can go ahead and share your screen. Natalie's the coordinator for the United Nations Environment Program's State of Finance report and is part of the climate finance team in the Nature for Climate branch. Over the last 20 years, she has worked at the interface of economics and the environment in the UN, at both the UNEP and the FAO, in government at the UK Department of Environment, and at the International Union for the Conservation of Nature, or IUCN. So Natalie, we see your slides. They're not quite in presenter mode yet.
Okay.
There we go, looks good.
Great. Thank you very much. I will try to be as brief as possible so there's some time for discussion. And thank you to David for already presenting some of the first edition findings of the State of Finance for Nature. I'll just quickly try to provide an overview. So for those of you who don't know the publication, UNEP started the State of Finance for Nature in 2021 with the objective of measuring and tracking finance flows to nature-based solutions. The last edition that was published at the end of last year, just before the CBD COP, also looks at nature negative flows from public sources, environmentally harmful subsidies in particular. And then the third key element is to estimate investment needs to reach some of the Rio Convention targets that we are focusing on. So just to be clear about the scope, the report focuses on 3 types of nature-based solutions and the finance for those solutions. And that is focusing on nature-based solutions for climate change, to tackle biodiversity loss, and to tackle land degradation as well. So we focus on finance flows that contribute to tackling climate change and or biodiversity loss and or land degradation. And so in effect, we're looking at the entire area of the Venn diagram here, which is important to note because there are other uses of the term nature-based solutions. And here we use the UNEP definition, which builds on the IUCN definition. But you often see that it's the area of intersection which is important for nature-based solutions. We took a fairly loose interpretation of the term. So I think it's important in terms of the scope of the finance that we're measuring. This provides an overview of annual public and private finance flows to nature-based solutions, which is currently at $154 billion per year. You'll see in the dark green zone and the light turquoise zone that most of that, and that's 83%, is from public sources. The very large part of that is domestic expenditure, and that's 126 billion per year, with 2 billion per year in official development assistance focusing on nature. You'll see in the salmon or pink area that private investment in nature-based solutions is relatively small at 26 billion per year. And we'll have a closer look at the breakdown of that investment a bit later. So here you see the 154 billion that's spent every year on nature-based solutions. As I said, 17% is from the private sector, the majority from public sources. What's important to note is that, and I think it was mentioned by previous panelists, is that fiscal expenditure, which is harmful to the environment, to nature, from governments is 3 to 7 times larger. So here we've quantified environmentally harmful subsidies to agriculture, to the fossil fuel industry, and to fisheries. And the key message here, and I think Adarsh touched on this, is that unless we repurpose and reform environmentally harmful subsidies, even dramatically increasing nature positive or investment in nature-based solutions is not going to be effective in achieving sustainability. In another part of the report, we look at investment needs needed to reach Rio Convention targets, and those are keeping climate change to below 1.5 degrees Celsius, halting biodiversity loss by 2030, and reaching land degradation neutrality by 2030. And to get on a pathway to achieve those targets, we would need $384 billion per year by 2025. We know that in the current economic situation following COVID, with the war in Ukraine, with the energy crisis, with food insecurity, growing inequality, and so on, governments are severely constrained in terms of how much they can increase funding. So it's clear that much of that finance gap is going to have to come from the private sector. The modeling also indicates that investment needs will simply increase over time, so that by 2030, we will need to triple current investment levels, and by 2050, we'll need to quadruple current investment levels if we're going to keep climate change to below 1.5 or even 2, halt biodiversity loss, and do something about land degradation. The idea behind the report series is to track finance over time and to establish a trend. We've only had 2 reports to date. We aim to have another one by the end of this year. But if we compare the findings from the first report and the recently published report, we see that finance flows increased by 2.6%, which is, it's good that it's positive, but it's very, very far from the increases that we need to reach the levels that are required for sustainability. Interesting to note that private sector finance into nature-based solutions increased by 10%, whereas public funding increased by only 1%. So it's good news, but it's very far from sufficient. And this is just a simple breakdown of current private financial flows to nature-based solutions. You'll see that about 1/3 of investment is in sustainable supply chains, about 1/4 into biodiversity offsets, and then some investment in payments for ecosystem services, philanthropy. Carbon markets, although they've grown significantly, the voluntary carbon market last year and the year before, still fairly small at 2 billion per year. So in terms of increasing private finance into nature-based solutions, we would need to dramatically increase investment in all of these categories, and potentially there's something missing here as well. We've been quite limited by existing data. And actually, just to reflect on environmentally harmful expenditure, and we looked at public nature negative public investment, which, as we saw, was 3 to 7 times the size of investment in nature-based solutions. Due to the absence of data, we didn't look at the nature negative flows from private sources, which I think we would all recognize would be many times greater. So I think just to finish on this slide, this illustrates some of the types of nature-based solutions and the amount of funding that we need to put into them to limit climate change, biodiversity loss, and land degradation. We've categorized these nature-based solutions into protection, to avoid deforestation, protecting peatlands, grasslands, and so on, sustainable land management, and restoration. In terms of increasing private investment, I think protection, previous panelists have talked a little bit about private and public goods and where there are revenue streams and where they are missing and what types of investment, who is going to invest and how much. And I think it's useful to recognize that when in areas where we need to protect ecosystems using nature-based solutions, it's going to be public money that's going to have to take the lead. But there are many opportunities, and other panelists have provided a lot of detail and information around them in terms of investing in sustainable land management and restoration using nature-based solutions. So I will stop there, and hopefully there'll be time for questions.
Thank you so much, Natalie. I appreciate it. And I think we have our last poll question, kind of a repeat from that first one. So we'll see how we do. And I welcome all the speakers to turn on their cameras, and we have time, hopefully, for 1 or 2 questions before we close. So I think the questions we have are more comments, and I welcome if there are any of the speakers in the Q&A who want to expand on those comments. Welcome you to do that, or if there's a question in the chat that you responded to and you want to expand upon live, you're welcome to do that also. So take a moment and answer the poll question, and we'll see the results from that. While we wait for the results, I have, oh good, we got a lot of almost everybody got this one right. So that we're looking at all of the above as opportunities for private sector investment. So thank you everyone for participating in that. And one observation I have that I open up as a question to the group. Actually, one question just came in for Natalie. This is a good one. Are you ready for this one, Natalie? So the question is, if you could help us understand how a debt for nature swap can find its relevance for MDBs or multilateral development banks.
I think that's a question for Eva, to be honest.
Yes, indeed. So there have been a couple of debt for nature swaps which Inter-American Development Bank has just implemented, just signed. One with now let me get that right, Barbados, and the second one with Ecuador. Now they do have a place in it, but traditionally, I mean, the more private sector focused multilateral development banks, which is, for example, the case of the EIB, we do public sector, but we are not in the business of debt relief. So it's not really a true debt for nature swap that either IDB has done or even the one in the Seychelles is not a true debt for nature swap. What it is it's a guarantee, and therefore using instruments like the policy-based lending instruments, and then guaranteeing that, and then the proceeds from that guarantee then flow into conservation measures. But it's not a debt relief, what was classically termed or structured in terms of the debt for nature swap. But they do, it is an opportunity to invest in nature. And we are going to see, I think, a take up from the parts of these MDBs, especially that do a lot of public sector financing in those debt for nature swaps. But a word of caution, they can only be implemented where you have governments with, or regional governments or national governments with fairly strong capacity. Not only technical capacity, but just general capacity, as well as fairly robust governance structures. It takes about a year to 18 months to structure such a deal. So it's not something that happens overnight. And so not the instrument that could be used for least developed countries or countries that already have a huge debt and that would actually increase their indebtedness.
Great, thank you so much. And I think, oh, Natalie, were you going to add? No. I think that kind of opens this question about enabling environment also, and how a lot of the case studies that we have are from countries with strong enabling environments, and how we create more examples in places maybe with higher financial risk, which leads to the question that just came in the chat about how financial risks associated with climate crisis can be addressed. And maybe there's some climate justice aspects there as well that link to the enabling environment. And that's a question for anybody, if anybody wants to jump in on any part of that, what I mentioned. Adarsh, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are other speakers here who really have the kind of top-down approach. Me, in my job, I'd work on actual projects more than policy and strategies. And for me, it is glass half full, to be honest. The evidence is improving. The investors want to put in money. The main risk is a role of an intermediary to put it together. And we are seeing this role being fulfilled by universities sometimes, by small NGOs, and this intermediary role can address a lot of the risks with nature-based solutions and climate. And banks are playing this role, local authorities are playing this role, charities are playing this role increasingly. And this ensures that the right language is used to speak to the stakeholders, the right evidence base. I think there was another question on how developing countries can benefit in the chat. And I think developing countries are where most of these biodiversity resources are. If you look at the woodland in Scotland, you cannot compare it with the woodlands in DRC and the forestry in DRC. They are at least 50 times, 100 times more biodiverse and rich than the woodland codes in Scotland and Canada and Scandinavia. So I think this intermediary role, in my view, because I've seen it work well, is a key function to address a lot of the risks.
Thank you so much for bringing that up, and kind of an inspiring note to almost end on, just as a potential path forward in enabling more intermediaries, as you suggest. So quickly, I'm going to close out, and I'm sticking with this playbook analogy about what does winning look like. And I think we heard from today's speakers is that winning will be, and I'll propose, when infrastructure investments are on a more sustainable climate and nature positive path. So to win this game, some of the things we've heard today are about mainstreaming nature-based solutions into infrastructure standards, procurement processes, and investment, including, as Aoife mentioned, critically important to include payment for long-term operation and maintenance costs. We need to curate a growing body of evidence, like the case studies and the work that Adarsh is doing and mentioned, and establish this track record on performance of nature-based solutions so we can quantify and monetize benefits like the tool that Marieke shared from Mott MacDonald has done, and use that to particularly increase private sector investment. Next, we can develop appropriate risk return profiles, diversify revenue streams, and create relevant guidance like the framework that Marieke shared to drive the sector's growth. And next, just narrowing this triple gap, this infrastructure finance gap, the nature finance gap, and the adaptation finance gap that was, I think, identified in that overlapping or intersecting area in the Venn diagram that Natalie shared. So just some, I'll kind of end there, and I want to, I just saw this quote from the UNEP that one small step for finance could be one giant leap for nature. So really applaud the CDRI for raising this as a theme, and look forward to hopefully many, many more advancements in financing going to NbS in the future. So with that, I think I'm passing it to Suchasmita for closing remarks.
Thank you, Emily. Before I close, one last poll, and then we can sort of wrap this up, wrap the entire series. Very simple question. We just want to know whether you learned anything new on the topic, which I think should be a big yes. You've learned a lot. It's been a journey for us, CDRI and UNEP. We started discussing this last year when we thought we should get together and sort of develop a series of webinars more around implementing nature-based solutions for infrastructure. So the idea basically was to build awareness, to bring in solutions, approaches, methodologies, tools which are out there, ready to be scaled up, replicated, and to engage more with the private sector. And we did a series of these webinars, starting from understanding NbS for resilient infrastructure, and Emily, you were on that first webinar. Yes, and we did a second one where we talked about how it really works. And then finally, we came to financing, where we are talking about, how do we really make financing get to NbS? And this has been a great, rich discussion. A big thank you to our panelists today, to all the panelists in our previous two webinars, to all the participants who've engaged with us since, I think, September or October last year, and now we are concluding with this one. And going forward, we want to continue this discussion. We want to bring in more solutions, tools, methodologies. We really want to mainstream NbS, and looking forward to collaborate, to partner, and to engage a lot more with everyone here. Thank you so much. And for the participants, those who have taken the poll surveys in the last 2 webinars, as well as this one, will be getting certificates from CDRI and UNEP. Thank you once again. And with this, we can close, and we'll look forward to keep in touch.